From the campus of Yale University, this is Business Talk with Jim Campbell, nationally syndicated across the country on the Biz Talk Radio Network, and coming to you from our flagship stations, Yale Radio WYBC and 1490 AM WGCH Greenwich. All talk and all business, 60 minutes of radio with leading figures from the world of business along with the business of politics and sports. In business, in sports, and in life, overcoming adversity often the key to success. How 11 athletes overcame big-time adversity in their youth with a leading Wall Street Journal reporter who brings with him his own youth, his co-authors, his two sons. Today on Business Talk with Jim Campbell, Gregory Zuckerman, special writer at the Wall Street Journal, three-time winner of the Gerald Loeb Award, highest honor, in fact, in business journalism. He's the author of The Frackers, the outrageous inside story of the new billionaire Wildcatters. Also wrote The Greatest Trade Ever, behind-the-scenes story of how John Paulson defied Wall Street and made financial history. Both of those books were featured on our show. We're joined by Gabriel Zuckerman. He's 18, a senior at Ray Kushner Hebrew Academy. He runs Paging Teens, a review site for young adult books. He's a starter on his high school's varsity soccer team. His brother, Elijah Zuckerman, 14, a freshman at Ray Kushner. He's the starting goalie on his team, and he came up with the idea for Rising Above. That's the name of the book, Rising Above, How 11 Athletes Overcame Challenges in Their Youth to Become Stars. Welcome back, Greg.
Great to be here.
And welcome to your sons, who are obviously the brains behind this outfit.
Most definitely.
All right, I'm going to start off with, we've just had this huge, almost revolution. Go from the market's perspective. You're at the Journal. That night, the Dow futures were down 900 points, and since then, we've seen record levels attained. Why the sudden feeling more comfortable with Trump, and tell us how the market deals with unknown unknowns, and this was an unknown.
Yeah, it's a remarkable turnaround. So at first, I wrote a story around midnight or so on the night of election night, and people were panicking. They were surprised. They were shocked even, and they were selling. And then people got to the office the next day and started focusing on what his policies might be. And yes, he's anti-trade, and people have a problem with that. But he also has talked about cutting taxes, especially corporate taxes. And there is a sense among investors that there's too much red tape, too much regulation of business. I'm not going to weigh in on whether I agree or not. It's hard to tell, but there is some sense that maybe he can get growth going. Now they're pricing it all in. Will we get that kind of growth? I don't know, but that's the bet.
Do you think there's a sense that maybe the wall, maybe the trade war, maybe getting rid of Glass-Steagall or radical things, that those things may not happen, really?
So I've talked to a number of investors, and they kind of say he's a businessman. He may want to do something, but he may not pull it off. He starts one way, and he negotiates. That's the benign, optimistic way to look at Donald Trump. There are other ways to look at him, obviously. But, yeah, there is some sense that that's not going to be the priority. The priority will be cutting taxes, and people like lower taxes.
All right, interesting. And we'll switch now to sports, and I'm going to ask Eli the first question because he's the person that came up with the book, as we announced in the intro. So where did you get this great creative idea, Eli?
Yeah, so I knew a couple of these athletes and their fascinating stories. So they all really touched my heart, and I really just wanted to find more of these stories and inspire other people because they really inspired me.
Impressive. You're only 14. So did you have to convince your dad, or where did the idea come to put it into a book?
Yeah, so I said I think there are enough athletes to make a book out of this. So then I asked my dad, and he said, yeah, it's a great idea. Then we went from there.
Okay, let me ask Gabriel now. Is he on the phone yet?
Gabriel, yeah.
Okay. How did you there's 11 in here. How did you pick them? 11's kind of a weird number, not 10 or whatever, but how did you pick them, and did you meet all of them?
So we really focused on finding inspirational stories. We scoured the internet, scoured all our resources, and just looked for the best stories. That's sort of how we came up with the number. We just found the best stories, and we found 11 appropriate stories that really are able to inspire a younger generation. And that's sort of how we went about picking our athletes.
And then we went to talk to them.
Okay, Greg, these guys are more articulate than you are.
Yes, every generation should improve on the last. Yeah.
Okay, we'll bring it back to business for a second. As you guys went through this, did you find similarities with CEOs or the kind of wildcatters you've dealt with in fracking across these adversity stories?
It's funny. It's only after I finished the book did I realize there's a commonality that I really love characters that achieve greatness against all odds. And same kind of thing, the frackers, who would have thought we'd find all this oil and gas in this country, and all the stuff was in places that the majors, the experts, said they couldn't figure out. Chevron, Exxon, et cetera. Greatest trade ever was about somebody named John Paulson, who was sort of a singles hitter at best on Wall Street, who made $20 billion over 2 years. And, yeah, the same kind of theme with these athletes. Each one was more unexpected than the next. Of course, they're blessed with athletic greatness and skills, but it takes much, much more, as we all know. And that's what we kind of set out to figure out. How did they overcome really imposing challenges and setbacks and differences?
Let me ask you for a second about John Paulson. He seems to be undergoing some adversity. I was seeing his assets under management are down like $20 billion. Has he lost his Midas touch?
Yeah, I would argue he has. I mean, he was a kind of guy who had a certain type of trade, and that was a trade with very limited downside. And he got away from that. So that's what the greatest trade was a trade with limited downside. But he got into gold, which had a remarkable amount of upside and downside. First, he was making a lot of money, then it went down, and then lately he's been doing things like drug stocks. And yeah, so he got away. I don't know if he lost his Midas chest, but he got away from his strategy. So sometimes that happens when you have a lot of yes men around you, or you have a lot of money that you've got to invest.
So maybe the sequel will be the worst trade on Wall Street.
Well, yeah.
I was just wondering if maybe he's just a long-term guy, so he's going to ride it out. But you think he may actually have gotten away from his core competency?
Yeah, it doesn't mean he's any, he's still smarter than the next guy. He still does a lot of work. And I give him credit for having conviction in a time when many on Wall Street don't, especially hedge fund managers and mutual fund managers. They hug the indexes. John Paulson doesn't. So I applaud that. And who knows, the next trade might be a winner. But, yeah, now he's getting away from his core competency, which is trades with limited downside and tremendous upside.
Interesting. All right, we're going to dive in now to some of these athletes who overcame adversity. We'll ask Gabriel, who plays soccer, about this soccer guy, Tim Howard. I hadn't heard of him. And it's kind of a not let yourself be defined by your condition deal. He has Tourette's and OCD. Tell us about Tim, Gabriel.
Yeah, so Tim Howard is actually probably one of the best soccer talents ever produced by the U.S. He is a goalie. He shined in the World Cup, in the last World Cup, and, yeah, he suffers from Tourette's and severe OCD, but the thing we found with Tim Howard is that in his biggest games, in his biggest matches, throughout his career, he used his Tourette's syndrome and his OCD to have this sort of hyper-focus. So he sort of turned his disadvantage into an advantage, and he really used it to win games and to stay hyper-focused on what was going on throughout the game. So that's sort of what we found with his challenge.
Interesting, too, because kids often mock kids with disabilities. Sports really gave him self-confidence.
Exactly.
All righty, Greg, this one, Dwayne Wade, I didn't also know about the details here. We're going to look at overcoming poverty, a fractured family. At 6 years old, he had a gun pointed to his head. Talk about Dwayne. Yeah,
he grew up in the inner city of Chicago, and one day he's watching cartoons at home, and the police burst into his home, put a gun to the back of his head, and said, "Where's your mother?" Because his mother was selling drugs and addicted to drugs as well, and she actually at the time was in the bathroom using drugs. And he dealt with that, dealt with poverty, dealt with violence. And what happened with him was his father came back into his life. And what we found in the book is each of the athletes, and we tried to do different sports and different types of challenges, physical challenges, racism, poverty, all kinds of different things, physical differences. But each of the players found someone in their life, be it a father figure, be it a coach, be it a therapist. With one player, it was a therapist, and you need someone in your life, and that's what happened with Dwayne Wade. His father came back into his life and took him out of the inner city, and his mother over years finally turned things around and kicked the habit, but it was a very difficult childhood.
In fact, you say he bought a church, or the building, I guess, where she's now a pastor.
That's exactly right. So, yeah, his mother went from being an addict who just could not kick her habit. She finally did and became a pastor, yeah.
One thing that fascinates me is, I mean, he could have gone the route of gangs, drugs, etc. What, aside from, he was helped by his father and moved out of that, but what allows someone like that to be the one guy that goes the other way?
Sometimes it's having remarkable skill, and even people in that area, that neighborhood, know enough to let you alone. Some kids are just so extraordinary that even gang members say this is a waste for you to join us, and a lot of it is just luck. One thing I find the older I get and the more people I write about is sometimes the difference between greatness and failure is just good fortune. So sometimes, again, you find somebody looking out for you, or you have nobody.
You're listening to Business Talk with Jim Campbell over the Business Talk Radio Network, 350 stations around the country. Stay with us. We're going to talk about Stephen Curry beating the odds next. We're back with Wall Street Journal reporter Greg Zuckerman, his son and co-author of Rising Above, Eli Zuckerman. And we'll start with Eli. This, I guess, is the old tell someone they can't do it and they're going to go out and do it. Talk about Stephen Curry for us.
Curry, he was short. Growing up, no teams picked him. He had a good shot, but no teams wanted him because he was short. And he wasn't recruited to any good colleges. He went to Davidson, but the reason why he succeeded and then he won the MVP, and he's just amazing, one of the best players in the NBA right now, is because his mindset. His mindset made him be the person he was today. He always thought of positive, and he thought that he could do it, and that's how he succeeded, because he thought he could do it, and he did anything so he can succeed.
I thought interesting, too, we're following D. Wade on this, in that he had the opposite family, a very strong, nuclear, confident family, and yet he still had the same level of drive as Dwayne Wade.
Yeah, they both had an amazing mindset, and that really led to their success.
And talking about hard work, his coach at Davidson, that expression is sleep in the streets. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, sleep in the streets. We love that phrase, too, my sons and I. It just kind of means in life, don't complain. If you have a setback, you practice, even if it means practicing until you've got nowhere to sleep at night because it's too late to go home. You sleep in the streets. So that was a phrase that his coach emphasized. That was a phrase that even Steph today, when we spoke to him, he said it's an important theme for him, even when he has a problem. I mean, early this year he had a tough early part of the season. He practiced and he came out firing, and he's on top of the game again. So yeah, he emphasized how even in his career, even in the pro career, he's had setbacks, and he's going to have to keep fighting through these things.
Tell us, did the three of you go and do face-to-face? Did some of you go to one, another to another, phone? How did you actually get all the information, the interviews done?
Well, for most of them, we either talked to them on the phone or we met them in person. So we sat in the Yankees dugout an hour before the game to interview R.A. Dickey, and that was like one of my favorite experiences. And we met Serge Ibaka at his hotel in New York when they were playing the Knicks, and we interviewed Jim Abbott when we were in L.A., and it was just amazing experiences.
Okay, and that's a good lead-in, I guess, Greg, for overcoming physical adversity. Tell us the Jim Abbott story.
Yeah, so Jim Abbott was born with one arm, and what was interesting about that is he was tested at an early age, not only of obviously people teasing him and kids can be cruel, but opposing coaches, even in Little League, they told their pitcher to bunt on him, to take advantage of his difference. And on one hand, you feel sympathy for him, but on the other hand, it helped him because it forced him to become a good fielder. And he used to practice and practice and practice and throw that ball against the wall. And you say to yourself, well, how could he practice? How could he become a good fielder? Well, you figure it out when you've got no options, and that's what we found with a lot of these athletes. And I find it, in some of my business stories too. Why did the frackers find all this oil? some of these companies were running out of natural gas and oil in this country, and they had no choice but to go dig down further in the surface and discover all this shale oil. So that's exactly what happened to Jim Abbott. He just practiced, and he figured out a way to field the ball, even though he only had one arm. And by the time he got to the majors, he actually was one of the best fielding pitchers in the game.
Yeah, I read that. I was surprised. Interesting to me, too, is this sort of an example of when you've got some sort of a physical or some sort of disability that you overcompensate and often end up becoming better.
Yes, and one of the things we found from our book is that a lot of these stars, they don't look at their difference as something to deal with or their challenge as something to overcome. It actually helped create who they are, and it almost became an advantage. So Tim Howard, the U.S. goalie, he's got OCD, as we said, and he has a remarkable amount of focus. He could focus on the ball, focus on the game more than anybody else. It also is the case of other types of players, too. Setbacks sometimes can lead to greatness. There's a player, we talk about Shane Battier, who was teased a lot growing up because he came from a mixed family and realized he couldn't fit in either the black or the white community. And he said, you know what? I'm not cool. I can't fit in. I don't care. I'm gonna create a game, a style of playing where I'm not so cool, but I'm really good. So he makes the extra pass or he plays extra defense. He does the things that other kids didn't want to do, and he said, you know what? I'm never going to be cool, so that's okay. I'm going to form a game that is really good, that takes advantage of these kind of skills, and I don't even care what people think. So we found that sort of time and time again.
And you would think, missing an arm would be a tough thing to overcome, and he genuinely feels that the misfortune ends up being a gift?
Yeah, and as a parent, what do we want to teach our kids? We want to teach our kids resilience and grit. It's a big theme nowadays, and it's not always easy to teach that. Well, these athletes, unfortunately, because you don't wish it on anyone, but sometimes because you have a physical difference, or you're born into circumstances that are not ideal, you at a young age have to deal with things, and it helps you later in life. So yeah, it teaches someone this grit and resilience, I believe.
And he threw a no-hitter for the Yanks, right?
Yep, Jim Abbott goes down in history, right? Throwing a no-hitter, had a good career. And his whole goal was not to be seen as a player with a difference, as a one-handed pitcher. He just wanted to be seen as any other kind of pitcher. And it was funny, later in life, he lost his fastball, and he didn't pitch so well, and he was beating himself up, and he was hard on himself, but he did realize to himself, he kind of achieved his goal. He was another pitcher that was booed off the mound like anybody else. So in some ways, it was a positive.
All right, we'll move to Eli. Now we'll look at a female now and overcoming racial and gender obstacles, and that's Althea Gibson. Go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, well, she overcame a humongous obstacle, and that's racism. For any kid, that would be huge. Everyone was just doubting her because she was African American, and but all the doubt, it made her want to achieve more. It made her want to succeed. She was also poor, but she had that mindset of succeeding, that nothing will get to her, and she'll just succeed.
Some of these guys defied their gang environments or whatever and were really good kids. But interesting here, she was always escaping. She was disobedient in school. And I guess she ended up turning that around and using it to sort of motivate her in the right direction.
Yeah, it's true. Anything bad, if you could just turn to anything good if you really wanted to. And even later in life, she became a teacher.
Yeah, I found that remarkable, that here's a kid that was cutting class and not paying attention early on, but she learned over time, how to deal with racism, and that is just to be, as Michelle Obama would say, when they go low, you go high, and she kind of turned the other cheek. But also, she appreciated the importance of education, and she went from somebody not going to school to later in life becoming a teacher even.
And you're listening to Business Talk from our flagship stations, Yale Radio, WYBC, and then here in Greenwich, Connecticut, 1490 AM WGCH. LeBron is next. And we're back with father and sons Zuckerman, their book, Rising Above, How 11 Athletes Overcame Challenges in Their Youth to Become Stars. And we're going to start off with Gabriel, and one that I know everybody will enjoy listening to. He's keeping his promises, meeting his promise. LeBron James, let's get to talk about him.
LeBron James grew up extremely poor. His parents weren't really around. He had no father figure, and his mom wasn't really around. But I mean, just like with all of our stars, he really used this disadvantage to his advantage. He really developed a work ethic. He developed, just a work ethic that really allowed him to succeed where others failed. And it's arguable that he may have not succeeded without this work ethic. But again, the one thing that really saved him, the one thing that really helped him is that he had a coach come in and be a good example and show him the way. And that's just somehow he overcame his challenge.
I was intrigued, first off, that from ages 5 to 8 he moved 12 times, which seems incredible, but that he also refers to that as giving him a sense of freedom. What does that mean?
Well, yeah, that's exactly part of what's so remarkable about a lot of these athletes, how they see setbacks and problems that you and I maybe would have difficulties with. They look back and they say it built character. So I think part of it is just him turning things, making a negative into a positive, and that's what he and a lot of other people seem to do. So, yeah, he says it gave him freedom. I think it just means he looks back on it, and he didn't mind so much because he got to see different places, but it couldn't have been much fun. I think he's trying to spin it in a positive way, not in a negative way, spinning in a negative way, but not let it get him down kind of thing. And going back to Gabriel's point, once again, somebody found him. A coach saw something in him. Not that he would be a super-duper star someday, but that he was a good kid that needed direction. Because, as you know from the book, he was missing class left and right and was going to get kicked out, and really was going to have some difficulties in life. And thanks to the coach, and again, sometimes it's a therapist, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a father, sometimes it's just some friend of the family. There's always somebody we find in our book that helps bail one of these, or gives an example and a model for some of our players.
Great story. I always thought at first when he went from high school right to the NBA that was going to be a mistake, but you picked this up in your book too. Where did he get amidst all this moving, et cetera, where did he get this sort of sense of maturity and calmness from such a young age?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, he was close with his mother, even though his mother sometimes would check out and in his life. He credits his mother a lot. He always had this feeling that she loved him, and there's something to be said for that. Even if the mother may not be around all the time, he had a sense that she just had this unbreakable bond and love with them. So that somehow gave him this confidence. But you're right, he had a calmness about him that maybe is just God-given and just good fortune there.
Now, he did go to Miami, which upset the folks in Cleveland. But to me, he's one of the only athletes in this era that actually felt that he wanted to actually deliver a championship to where he grew up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he gets a lot of credit for coming back. He didn't have to. Cleveland wasn't a sexy destination, and he said, I'm gonna bring a championship back home, and he did. He succeeded. He's a really remarkable kid in some ways. And, he thinks of and thanks his mother a lot, but he talks about Frank and Pam Walker. Those are the parents. Those are the couple, and Frank was the coach. He thanks them. Decades later, he's still thanking them on TV and other times. So he has a lot of appreciation for the help he got.
Maybe we'll get to Gabriel on this. You touched on it before that Shane Batche felt different growing up in his family and black father, white mother. So go ahead there.
Yeah. So like my dad mentioned, so he never really fit in, and he sort of learned to accept that. And I think that's sort of a powerful message for kids, that you don't need to be what people think is cool. You don't need to act a certain way. You don't need to say certain things. As long as you are, comfortable with who you are, I think then you can succeed. And that's exactly what Shane Battier did. He was comfortable with the kind of person he was. The way he played ball, that was his own way, and he felt comfortable with that. So that's sort of how he dealt with his challenges, and he really used it to succeed.
Do you? It's a real challenge, right, to sort of stop caring what people think about you?
It takes time. It's over time too. It took him a while. When we talked to Shane, he said when he was at home, he lived in suburban Detroit, an upper middle class white area, and he never fit in. He never thought that people accepted him for who he was. So he said, all right, I'm going to go when I can and play in the inner city AAU. And he's like, I'll fit in there. And he gets there, and they start teasing him, oh, here's the white kid from suburbia with the dimples and the nice sneakers. So, yeah, it took him a while, and he was down on himself for a while. And then he finally said, hey, I can't fit in anywhere, so I'm going to be who I am, and I'm not going to care what people think.
All right, Greg, this one, I didn't really know a lot about this, too. We're talking now about a victim of sexual abuse, had an alcoholic mother, R.A. Dickey.
Yeah, there may be nobody in the book who overcame more. Grew up single parent. He didn't have much money at all. He got in fights with his parents, too. The father wasn't usually around. The mother he had difficulties with, and eventually he had to break into apartments, empty, vacant apartments, for somewhere to sleep at night and roll up a sweatshirt and put it down on the floor and go to sleep. And as you mentioned, yeah, he was sexually abused both by a female babysitter and a local boy. So he had all this stuff bottled up and he had to deal with, and he became a pitcher and was about to sign a $1 million contract. And then one day, the pitching coach for the Texas Rangers saw a picture of him on a cover of a magazine and said, you know, that elbow, he's holding his elbow in a weird angle. Something might be off with that elbow. Let's bring him in. They checked him out. Turns out he was missing a ligament, and they slashed his bonus from $1 million to $50,000. So he went through so much. And then he lost his fastball. So the poor guy dealt with so many things and was close to suicide, really close to suicide a couple of times. And he found a therapist, and he didn't want to go to a therapist. Someone encouraged him to. He finally went, and it was interesting. When he started getting comfortable talking about his issues and his past and his history, his pitching started improving. I don't think it's a coincidence. And we saw that in other players, too. When they start opening up and becoming comfortable with their differences and their issues in their life and themselves, their performance improves. So, yeah, R.A. Dickey became a Cy Young Award winner and one of the better pitchers over the last decade, but he overcame so much.
And willing to pick up a knuckleball, too, which is tough to get to that Cy Young.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And he says in some ways because of what he went through, he was more open to trying something like a knuckleball because it's not a cool pitch. You're not firing the ball past everyone. It's a pitch with some issues, and people make fun of it, and you have some insecurities, and that's kind of who he is. That's how he sees himself. And, yeah, he recreated himself as a pitcher. He used to be a fireballer and lost his fastball and became a knuckleballer.
Did he talk to you about how was he able to learn to trust people and risk, being this honest about his story?
He did, and he said it took him a long time, very long time. Did not want to share his story with anyone. Again, dragged his feet about going to therapy. Even there, it took him a while to open up. Now his message, and the beautiful thing about the process of the book is each of the players sat down with us. It's one thing to talk to me as a reporter, an adult, but some of these guys put their arms around my sons and taught them life lessons. And I don't think it was just for them. I think the athletes wanted my sons and I to pass these lessons on to readers, and we did that in Rising Above. And R.A. Dickey kind of said, if you have an issue in life, find someone to reach out to. It could be a therapist. It could be someone in school. It could be a parent of a friend. Find someone because you need someone.
Is he working with victims of sexual abuse now or anything like that?
No, he's not focused on it right now. He's still got a career. He just signed actually today with the Atlanta Braves. But I do think after he finishes, retires, I'm sure he's going to focus. He does a little bit of that on the side, off season. But I think it's going to be more of a focus. All
right, Gabriel. This one rolls in your way, talking about overcoming poverty in Africa. War amongst 8 nations, 5 million people die, seeing people die in front of you. I don't know if I'm pronouncing right. Is it Sergei Ibaka?
Serge Ibaka.
Serge, okay.
So, yeah, Serge Ibaka, he grew up in that environment. It was wartime. His mother died at a very young age. His father was taken away as a political prisoner. And Serge Ibaka, he grew up in a pretty poor neighborhood. He used cardboard to reinforce the soles of his shoes. So he was playing basketball, and that was his big outlet, but he didn't really have the resources. It wasn't really such a good ball, and the soles of his feet were covered with cardboard because he couldn't afford to buy new shoes. And this, again, he sort of took this and he sort of used that disadvantage to his advantage once again. He really was able now to play anywhere, to play on the real courts. He was that much better because he was used to playing on playing with cardboard shoes and horrible courts, and it really just allowed him to outwork everyone. And he told us when we met with him that he would see all his friends go to the clubs, all his friends party, and they would tell him, come on, don't focus on your career, you're never going to make it. But he really buckled down. He wouldn't let anyone dissuade him, and he focused on his career, and he made it to the NBA, and he is amazing. And that's really the lesson he preaches, that you've got to focus on what's important to you and don't let all that partying and all the distractions get in your way.
Well said. And we'll be back for our final national segment. We'll talk some more adversity. We're back. Greg Zuckerman of the Wall Street Journal and his son Eli joins us for the final segment here. And we're going to start off with Greg. Talk about being a drug dealer at 10 years old or something like that. Caron Butler certainly turned it around.
Yeah, there's really maybe no one in the book that had a more difficult, challenging start to his life. And as you suggest, he was in a gang, dealing drugs, and was arrested 11 times before the age of 12. And the way he kind of said to us is, or the way he talks about his experiences, basically, there was a turning point. He was in prison, solitary confinement at one point because he got in a fight with another prisoner. He looks outside and he sees what other people are doing, and there's maybe a basketball court, I forget, and he says, I got to stop what I'm doing. And the way he kind of says it is there was a cycle of men in his family, and he wanted to break that cycle. So there were just men going to prison, and you read about it, you hear about it, people just breaking the law and going to prison, getting out and getting in trouble again. So when he came out, he basically said, again, I don't care what people think, I'm going to settle down and do something a little more constructive. And he started working in just a restaurant, a fast food, a Burger King. And his friends were teasing him, hey, you're wearing that uniform, you're making so little. You could have made a lot more money as in the gangs, but he didn't care. Once again, he give him credit for saying, I'm going to kick the habit, as it were, and settle down. And then he turns out he was a remarkable basketball player, went to Connecticut, went on to the NBA, and he was a star in the NBA, not a superstar, but what I think he was best known for was as a character player. So teams traded for him, like Oklahoma City in 2014. They traded for him because he was a character guy. He was a grinder, as they said, tough-minded kind of person, and that's important too. And again, he got that character. He built that character through those difficult times early on in his life.
And working in Burger Kings, he owns 6 now, I believe you say?
Yes, right. So he made it a point to go and buy some.
Another thing I noticed is that he felt he was going to look like a failure in the eye of his grandmother, and I see throughout the book that the grandmother plays huge roles often. Right.
That goes to that point where there's got to be somebody in your life, be it a coach or a friend or somebody.
Okay, Eli, we got a Stanley Cup coach who couldn't even read. That's a pretty amazing story.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's the most inspirational for me. So growing up, he was physically abused by his father, and when he was at school, that's all he was thinking of. He was thinking of what his father is going to do to him tonight and what he just did to him. Growing up, he couldn't learn how to read or write, but that didn't let him stop him from what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to be an NHL as a coach, and he did that from hard work and dedication. So growing up, he was a manager at some Little League teams, and then college and NHL started to realize how good he was, and they moved him up. And then he was a coach for the NHL and won back-to-back Coach of the Year and won a Stanley Cup. But throughout all these years, he still never told anyone that he was illiterate. He was walking around through the clubhouse with newspapers so people thought that he could read. He pretended to wear glasses so people thought he could read, and he was just hiding it. And then at the age of 60, he came out with it, and he said, I'm illiterate. He didn't even tell his family. And then at 60, like I said, he came out, and he was scared that people weren't going to accept him, but everyone accepted him, everyone loved him, and everyone just said, you shouldn't have to worry like that. We love you. We don't care about that.
It's a great story. I'm also impressed he grew up abused, but his coaching style was not to sort of be abusive at all. He was more of a family oriented. And if I remember this correctly, he's in Canadian Parliament now. So
in some ways, he actually went the other way. So he gave extra love and support because he never got that growing up.
Okay, Greg, let's get to sort of the end. We'll wrap this up. Obviously, these guys are all unique, highly specialized, but you feel that everybody should be able to relate to these kind of stories?
Yeah, so it's our contention that everyone's got a difference. Maybe it's the parent, maybe it's not, maybe it's physical, maybe it's something else, but everyone's dealing with something in life. And yeah, the stories, we wrote them and we researched them and we talked to the players to give inspiration and maybe motivation for young people, because if they can overcome these kinds of things, then perhaps it'll give inspiration and encouragement to other people to overcome what they're dealing with. So, yeah, I think we all can relate, because what we did is choose many kind of differences: physical, emotional, racial, all kinds of different things, poverty. So, again, we tried to make it something universal that other people can relate to.
Now, obviously, Eli and Gabriel growing up in a very good environment there, and going to obviously a very good school. Does it worry you sometimes that maybe they're too protected from adversity, kids in an area like Greenwich here, et cetera?
There is an issue there, and also as a parent, you're tempted to coddle and only support and never be critical. That's parenting today. So that's part of why I kind of did this book in some ways, to teach my kids, but also other kids, that they have it they're very fortunate. But I think in their own ways, everyone's got their own. They're not the same, but different types of setbacks and things they overcome. I know, kids have tutors and they have embarrassments of their own. So on a smaller scale, I think they can relate to some of the things that the athletes do. But yeah, as a parent, you want your kid to have smooth sailing, but that they may not be even the best thing for them.
Okay, Eli, what was it like to work with Dad? Did you guys was this a bonding experience too?
Yeah, it was amazing. I've only watched him write books, and I've never experienced it with him, and this is my first experience, and it was amazing. He taught me so many things, and I loved it, and it was just amazing interviewing the players with him, and him teaching me tricks to interview players and everything like that. It was amazing.
How have your friends related to the book? I mean, they're looking up to you guys as authors now. Are folks reading it in school, et cetera?
Yeah, everyone really thinks that it's amazing, and they always joke around, when are you going on TV again? And it's not just that they think that it's so cool because we met all the players. They read the book and they think that it's very inspiring. They love the idea of the book.
All right, last question for you, a short one. Do you and your brother feel more comfortable now looking at adversity in the eye and how you can turn it into opportunities and things like that?
Yeah, I don't see any other kid differently if they have any adversity. It doesn't really matter to me. Everyone's still the same, and if you have adversity, you could still accomplish anything that you want.
Okay, that's a great note to end on. Thanks to the Zuckermans, Greg, Gabriel, Elijah. Gabriel has a website, pagingteens.com. Greg, are you working on anything next?
We actually have a follow-up book focused on female stars that should be out next year sometime, so we're excited about that. And I've got a couple of ideas for the next financial adult book, but we'll see where that goes. Okay, and the current book, Rising Above, How 11 Athletes Overcame Challenges in Their Youth to Become Stars. This has been Business Talk with Jim Campbell. Next week, why do they do it? White-collar criminals like Madoff. We'll have a professor from the Harvard Business School who's just written a book about it. Thanks to Greg, Gabriel, Eli. Thanks to our national audience, and we'll see everybody next Sunday.